Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the podcast where we're moving the conversation forward about the choices you make in your daily life. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and I'm here right alongside of you, learning, growing, observing, and trying to make better choices consciously and subconsciously. Together, we're going to become better versions of ourselves and have raw, honest, open conversations about the things that truly affect our lives. And maybe, just maybe, finally get to a place where everyone else's BS doesn't trigger us. From my perspective, and for everyone who knows you, we all know that you're an amazing writer, and you have that gift. And watching you not utilize it for so many years, until maybe your awakening and like, hey, this is a passion of mine. I've been given this gift. What's your journey with that right now, with the tie-in of having this traumatic event, making the choice to become the man or become a man that maybe you were meant to be, not the man you thought you were supposed to be, and taking the steps to bring that into your life, whether it just be a hobby or, something you pursue in the future?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and the writing is critical, man. Like, in terms of recognizing the things that have helped me personally, obviously I talked about the meditation, uh, communication and being open and talking about people. And we can come back to that because that's, was really key also in terms of that vulnerability. But the writing was the third real pillar for me. And it was just the ability to start putting down how was I feeling. So, it started very basically, which was just being able to write exactly what I was going through. And then obviously that led on to the point of saying, okay, actually, this is something, not only does it make me happy and it brings me joy, but it's also something that is actually helping me process certain things. Through that period of time, as I mentioned, I was still working a lot and have been working a lot. But, after the pandemic, it really became apparent that, now was the time for me to actually spend more time on the writing part. And as you know, I've decided to take time off to, really focus full time on it and to get a bit more of a literal education and study creative writing. It's another kind of step where, like, when I made the decision, it was really more about like, I just want to write and want to do it. But, as I've gone through it, the actual project, my thesis project that I'm doing in my master's is directly related to our story with Annabelle. And the academic part of kind of the project is also linking to doing research and understanding how writing, say, autofiction actually helps people process trauma. And doing so many or reading so many interesting studies around that, and particularly when it comes to, people who, it could be war veterans, it can be people who have, had traumatic events happen to them, and people who have suffered loss. But this ability to write something almost from a third person perspective allows you to kind of assess what you've gone through in a completely different light. You almost remove the ego out of it and you describe what's happening as opposed to living it yourself. And there's a lot of research that's pointing towards that being incredibly beneficial to people. And I've certainly found that, the story I'm writing isn't directly our story, but it's definitely aligned to certain events. And there are things when I look back, I'm able to go back to some of those traumatic memories. And, when I was talking about fear before, those were the things that constantly derailed me. You're sitting there, you hear a siren, boom, you're there. Like I'm in a meeting at work, someone says one word and that's a trigger, and then I'm back there. Meditation kind of helped me deal in that moment. So, maybe I didn't start spiraling, but it through this writing that I've been doing now, it's also giving it much more context, and it's given me the courage to start facing things that I didn't want to do. Revisiting old places, putting myself in situations where we were before. And whilst it's incredibly tough, it feels so rewarding. And it's also given me a closer connection back to Annabelle, which
Mhm.
is, going back to finding meaning, it is really, really meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, I can look back at my journey and understand why every shitty thing happened, right? Because it was again and again and again. And it was like by the end of it, I was like, haven't I gone through enough? Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Even into motherhood, even after I succeeded, getting into motherhood and just like stumbling yet again and just going like, Jesus, like, and being at a point now where you're still always learning, you're still always growing, but at the same time looking back and going, I understand that now. I understand why I had to go through that because this is what I learned from it and this is how I can use that in my life. And I think that's where choices come in. Whether that's real or not, that's what I'm choosing to believe, right? Like everything happens for a reason or giving meaning to things. It's all a choice down to you. And when you choose to take these horrific times in your life and make meaningful meaning out of it, you start to create this beautiful life that honors the past in the sense of whether or not you lost someone or you lost a part of you, like whatever it
Mm,
is, you're
mm,
honoring that and you're making um just a beautiful life not only for yourself and your family, but for that loss.
mm. And I agree, and I think it's that thing around the choice of wanting to heal, because, and again, it's one of the key messages that I take out of meditation is, it talks about what's your intention with the meditation, and my intention has always been to be a better person for those around me.
Mhm.
And by taking that choice to heal, it it enabled that, and it enabled others around me to also understand more about what we were going through,
Mhm.
because that's the other thing. Like, the ego protects you at the beginning, but it also protects, or it stops anyone else from being able to come in and support and help you.
Absolutely.
And I've been able to have lots of conversations, and people are like, "Fuck," like, is that really what happened? And is that what you went through? And by doing that, it's also giving them an understanding of, how it was and what we went through, but also, they then are able to potentially share something themselves to
Mhm.
come back. And there's elements of that, I guess, building a shared knowledge around, how did I navigate this? How are you navigating that?
Yeah. And as is that the communication piece that you were talking about, like your kind of 3 pillars that you had was the meditation, the communication, and then the writing. Being able to communicate with people that maybe have the shared experience and people who don't have the shared experience, that was a big part of the healing.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think I think when it comes with some of this stuff, yeah, there's this element of self-protection where you don't want to share things, obviously. In there's certain situations, there's a fear of being judged, and I definitely had that.
Mhm.
There's a fear of people will just treat you differently, or there will be just this constant air of pity. And I think, that leads to feelings of like, I just want to run away when no one knows who I am and doesn't know that this thing happened to me. So there were elements where I shared, certain things, but it was very brief knowledge, and it was very, controlling, really wanting to control the message. And I think over time, it kind of ate away at me that I almost lived like a completely different life. I had relationships with people that didn't even know this thing happened to me.
Mhm.
And I was too afraid to say it, and then when you've had a relationship with someone for a while and then you feel like, oh, it's gone on too long now, so I don't feel like I want to, burden this on them. And yeah, I felt like that. I felt like it would be a burden at times. But it was, again, through this whole process of seeing what the right thing to do was. And I knew what the right thing was to do. And it was to share, and it was to tell people this is what I go through. The work thing was a big thing for me. And like I was, managing a team of people, and we were constantly talking about being open and sharing, and, we're doing all the corporate speak. And here I was holding this huge part of me. And it was at a period of time where I was struggling with my mental health. And I just got to a point where, okay, I'm really afraid of doing this. And now I got to do it. Yeah, I remember hitting send on the email at midnight and firing that off, and then having a very fitful sleep, wondering what was going to happen the next day. And it was an amazing experience because I came out of the train station, and one of my team saw me and just came up and gave me a massive hug,
Yeah.
and just said, I'm so proud of you having the courage to share that, and then proceeded to tell me a story that was relevant to him as well. And, for the rest of the day, it was exactly the same thing. Like, everyone individually came up, took some time with me to talk about it and to say, hey, we understand, and we're here to support you as well. And it had nothing but positive
Yeah.
outcomes in that sense. And I think for me, that was also like another watershed moment. And each time I keep pushing myself, and it's been that for the last 3 to 4 years. And even doing this podcast is another example where, having a feeling of anxiety and potentially talking about it, and not knowing how it's going to go, it felt important, to be able to start sharing how I've felt and how I feel, and what are the steps that have been able to make me grow, and also come to terms with what happened, and realize that there's elements of it that has made me a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, when I think about um evolving, for lack of a better word, and sharing your evolution with the people around you, you kind of come to the terms of the people who are supposed to be there with you, even if they're not evolving at the same rate, are going to be around. And the ones who are like, Nope, no good," they're just going to slowly fade away. And it's a very bittersweet thing, right? Because, sometimes we're talking multiple decade relationships or family
Mm.
members. But I don't think it's a bad thing, right? Like, are you gonna keep yourself the same to, please everyone, or are you gonna, rise to the person that you were truly just meant to be here on earth and be surrounded by the people that are on this journey with you? But it's a very scary thing, especially when you're married. And those long-term relationships, you're like, I know for me that was a huge fear of, like, when I started getting into this, because as you know, my husband like is very
Mhm.
scientific, and it's just like, you are on the woo train, and that was a big fear I had to get over. Has there, as a man, is that a big thing for you in your relationships, even just like friendship wise, of like, wow, how are people going to receive me?
I think maybe initially, I think it's been more of, I guess the way that I've gone about it is to build up how much I've shared, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm a little bit strategic, but it has been more like that. And I think I've almost brought like a lot of, my very, very close friends, I haven't overwhelmed them
Yeah.
in a sense. Um, there is this thing of, like we said before, around guys and talking and being put on the spot to share their feelings. But unequivocally, when I've been able to share, and the things that I've learned, I always say to my friends, ask the second question, because we always say, how you doing? And everyone says, I'm good, particularly guys. And I always ask the second question, which it can be a variety of different questions, but the second question to me is really like, no, I'm here, man. I'm present and I'm interested in how you are and how you feel. And I think it's been a positive thing for all of my friends in that sense. There hasn't been anyone that I think has felt, uncomfortable to the point of not wanting to be around me. I've always been a bit different anyway, so maybe that helps. But I think they recognize where I'm coming from and they recognize the journey that I've been. And again, thinking about this meaning thing, if I hadn't gone through this trauma, maybe they wouldn't have the same kind of understanding for the messages that I'm talking about. And maybe the messages that I'm giving them wouldn't resonate as much. So there is that aspect to it as well. There's certainly people that, if you give them a little bit too much too quickly, they're going to recoil a little bit, maybe, particularly with some of the stuff I'm starting to get more interested in. But I think, following the same approach and being able to share of what we've gone through has certainly helped that. And it can be as simple as starting to talk about Annabelle,
Mhm.
talking more and saying her name so that other people felt okay to say her name and to ask us how it was.
Yeah.
Taking that first step in that sense. And again, these are one of these things that when I'm talking to other people who have gone through loss, it's important to keep saying that person's name, and it's important to not be afraid to ask them how they feel about those things. Yeah, by and large, when I have opened up, I've only ever really experienced positive things because I think, and it's the same with guys, everyone wants to unburden themselves at a certain point, right? Like everyone gets that physical release when you say the thing you've been thinking and you don't want to say. There's like an endorphins related to that, particularly when you walk around and potentially there's things that people haven't said for decades. So I think being an enabler for people to feel safe and comfortable to be able to say that stuff is something that I try to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's that, the body keeps score. And now, I'm sure the things you're diving into is the things I'm diving into is that that these emotions get stuck. And when you become hyper aware of how your body reacts to things, you'll get like for me, it's like the heavy chest, right? Like it will get heavier and heavier and heavier until I finally listen, like, okay, like something's going on. I need to release it.
Mm,
Maybe I need to discover what it is in the first place.
mm.
But these emotions stay with us in your journey too. Now, do you recognize the quote unquote bad habits that you had or personality traits that you can look back on and now can you see them as defense mechanisms that you built up from childhood and just lived experience and maybe the way your father was raised by his father and all that kind of stuff? Or do you see that link now?
It's a good question. I've always had a pretty strong relationship with my dad in terms of being open and talking about stuff. I have always been a talker, so I think that there is an element of that, even as a child, bringing that out with conversations with my dad. I think there's definitely the part of you can solve anything, you can do anything. That definitely comes through, from childhood. And that's not necessarily a bad message. That's, like a positive kind of affirmation in the sense of you can be whatever you want to be. I guess that becomes, if it becomes unchecked to a certain point, then yeah, it does become a negative behavior. I certainly look back on, some of the things I did, at work, and in some of those environments where the way that I was taught this is how you got things done, and that definitely potentially caused an element of harm to some people, and definitely not really proud of that. So definitely there is an element of reflection. There's certain things that in your teenage years and early 20s, of course, man, like the kind of disregard for other people's feelings, putting yourself centric in pretty much every narrative, definitely, cause some people harm, and, you feel bad about that. But equally, that was a space and time where, a lot of it was unconscious, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I say is that the way you show up to a traumatic event or a hard time in your life is the way you've been patterned, right? The way you've been running. And
mm,
so when do the work, or when you have that inner peace or that enlightenment, whatever it is, when a traumatic event happens, you don't sit in that black deep hole for so long,
mm,
and you
mm,
don't spiral out. So when I'm dealing with my clients who are dealing with fertility issues, and they're struggling with being type A or like controlling or anything like
mm,
that, I don't even focus around the fertility. I'm like, let's go back to the past, because you're
mm,
just showing up how you know to show up,
mm,
and where can we support that and make better choices, make better habits, make better subconscious beliefs that
mm.
is running the conscious world around us.
Mm. And for me, like, that concept of awareness, again, which was really driven through meditation, it wasn't just about understanding my body and understanding my thoughts and how I felt about things. It was also understanding the impact I had on other people,
Mhm.
and how I show up and how my mood is and how my body language is, and what impact is that going to have on people. And you take it further now, obviously, with how you parent your kids, and being aware of that, and being aware of what kind of that behavior. And there's elements of growing up where like we mentioned before, there was that physicality, that's just how it was.
Mhm.
And that kind of aggressive mindset, or the ability to be dominant, was rewarded.
Yeah.
And like I say, it was certainly rewarded in the workplace, but equally now you recognize that there's toxic elements of that the impacts are you know far outweigh any benefits that come from being able to operate in that way. So for sure, there's things like that the awareness now just, yeah, it kind of allows you to not you don't always catch yourself, and that's something that to make very, very clear. Like, there's no way that I moderate my behavior. um, but it's more about the benefit that I see. It is more about having the ability to say I'm wrong, and I was wrong, and I recognize that I did something there that caused you to feel uncomfortable, or not to feel safe. And um, the acknowledgement of that is the key thing for me. And also being able to then explain that the intent wasn't there. I think intent
Yeah.
is key in a lot of areas. We can feel like people are harming us, and it's the same when I feel, if people, I feel like you're being wronged or whatever. I now have the ability to step outside and say, well, okay, but what was maybe driving them to do that? Did they have a bad day? Have they had something that's happened to them? Have they felt threatened in a certain way, and then therefore they're lashing out here? And that compassion and understanding enables you to loop back and then have a conversation with that person as well, and say, hey, how's it going? So yeah, there's a number of benefits from having that awareness. Like I say, it's never like catch yourself in the moment and stop yourself from being a dick, but it's definitely helps you uh, close the loop very quickly on it, which I think in any relationships, and I can say with my wife, it's just creates a much more loving relationship, because you're not holding on to things.
Mhm.
I think in the past, when we were both kind of going through our own journeys of recovery, you would hold on to stuff because that ego wanted to protect you, whereas now it's we both have the ability to very quickly say, what, I did something wrong there. Let's talk about it, let's understand why I did that, and let's park it and move on.
Yeah.
And as you said about that tightness in your chest, like that release is something that is pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, your reality becomes so different with everything around you. Like, and even people who maybe you're not in close relationships that you can have heart to hearts and work things out, the way you show up is going to affect the way they react to you. And I think that is such a superpower, like we all want these like superpowers when we're younger. If you can realize that and work on it, right? Because it doesn't happen overnight. Your whole reality shifts quite quickly when you're able to show up more as your authentic self, right? More of the person that I think all of us are born to be. And it just happens that we get born with some luggage and some society bullshit. It just kind of like
Yeah.
messes us up. And it's our job as adults, if we choose to do so, to unpack and learn different ways. Um, is there any kind of advice for people who are in the thick of it right now? Like we already said that, sometimes it's just the message that the way it's delivered, you're gonna hear what you want to hear when the timing's right. Um, but if there was like a piece of nugget, like a knowledge that you would want had like been given to you during that time, what would it be?
Uh, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, every situation is different, and it can be complex. I think it's important to impart hope. I think it's very difficult when you're in, a very close from a traumatic event that you just don't feel like you will ever feel different. I think hearing stories from people that have gone through something similar and that there is, a possibility and hope, I think that's a really, really important message. I know I didn't really get that at the time, and that would have been really important. Um, I, I think for someone who has just recently experienced it, that would be it. The main thing that I always say, to people who are going through stuff is don't lose your good memories. Pair your good memories with your bad ones.
Hmm.
Because it's very easy for your mind to go very quickly to the bad memories when those things have happened, and the anger and all of those things that you're holding on to after an event has happened, but you very quickly lose the good things that happened as well, with
Hmm.
that person. And that's something that it was a little trick that I, quickly learned, was that if I had a very bad, flashback, I would work really hard to pair it with something positive, like a nice memory that I had with Annabelle, whether it was, holding her and dancing, or whether it was, out walking with her, or sitting in a park, and that to me very quickly started to just shift those experiences when I had that flashback. It wasn't something that I would sit there and dread,
Hmm.
and constantly steer away from, because sitting within those memories, I think, is an important part of healing. And it's very difficult if all of those memories are bad.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of pair, and having almost having a cache, it's like this mental Rolodex or mental Instagram, of not just swiping on the bad stuff, and being able to bring those in. That they would be a couple of things. Depending on where you are in the journey, I think it is that point of like yeah, you've got to want to heal. It's so important. You've really got to want to heal, because it won't happen unless you do it. And there's so much, man. Like, doing this literature course that I'm doing, and you go back through all of what we suffer from and how we feel. People have been struggling with this stuff for thousands and thousands of years, and there is so much good advice out there. And for me, like, everyone finds stuff that resonates for themselves, but this concept, that the existentialist had, which was around, you've got to kind of make yourself. You've got to take that responsibility. Obviously, you need support to do that, but I think it starts with you. But like I say, that's much further on. If something's happened at the beginning, then yeah, maybe hope.
Yeah, there's a great book called How We Change, and he talks about how hope is the driver of change. You have to be hopeful that today's going to be a better day to get out of bed, right? So you have to
Mm,
hold on to that hope that there is something different, maybe something better in the future, because if you didn't have that, then yeah, why would you want, yeah, like, get out of bed?
mm,
I think hope is crucial to any journey. Um, and just some last remarks on being the dad, right? Because in a fertility family journey, there's different roles. I don't care what society thinks that it's equal. It's fucking not, right? There are different roles, which I think you get to choose your roles, right? They don't have to be black and white, mother, father type of roles. But in your experience as the father in this family, um, what do you think would be, another nugget of knowledge to know as the dad, either for other dads or other moms, from your point of view of navigating this family journey?
mm. I mean, I guess initially my mind goes immediately to just that concept of being present. I think, like and not hiding away from those difficult conversations. I think that's one of the things that it's taught me. And there's a school of thought around potentially protecting kids and, letting them be kids. And there's obviously a balance in what I'm saying. But for me, it's been really open with my kids, around how I feel, that at times I don't feel good. And so I recognize if they don't feel good, I can empathize with that.
Mhm.
But really putting myself in the situation of being as vulnerable to them as I, am to my wife, as I am to, my friends, and not trying to have this persona as being perfect. I think we can sometimes feel like that. We have to role model every single behavior that is perfect for our kids and never let them know that we're struggling, and so on. And for me, that is something that I've definitely taken out of this, is that I want to be really open with my kids. I want them to understand that, I'm definitely not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes. But equally, that the space where we create, or the space that we create as a family, is a safe one for them to be able to say how they feel. And
Mhm.
if they're struggling, or if they're sad, or if they're happy, then all of those feelings are equally as valid. We don't have to hide that we're not feeling good. So that would definitely be one kind of, behavior that I definitely try and model, with my sons.
Yeah, I think that is crucial, especially coming from a man's point of view, because there is a societal, tendency to block all emotion. And, bad emotions aren't welcomed, leave them at the door, and that's just not reality. And it's never going to be reality. You're going to hit 80 and you're going to feel like, have bad days. And when we recognize that, I think it makes it more harmonious moving through life, instead of trying to, and I think that contributes to the whole ego problem too, right? Of like, well, I can do it by myself. I don't need that. I don't need this. I never saw my dad do it, like, how many people can say they saw their dad cry? Probably only
Yeah.
a small handful of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, that is known for the sons and the daughters out there. And I do think that it supports masculinity, more so. Brad, it's always a pleasure. I usually say I link like where you are on social media, but you will not find Brad on like anywhere on the internet. If you ever have something that comes up, I will link it. But thank you so much for, showing up, being raw and vulnerable, and, just sharing your experiences with the choices that you've made in your life.
Thank you so much for having the conversation. It's meant a lot, and I'm really enjoying listening to all the other conversations and the different viewpoints. It's really healthy to get so many different ideas, I think.
Absolutely. And there are some wild ones on this podcast for sure.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to come back and talk about anything else that you're diving into, the door is always open. Thank you so much again for joining us here on Choices. You can go ahead and leave a 5-star review because we're all friends here. But if you really want to move the conversation forward, please connect with us on our social media accounts, which you can find the links below. Have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next time here.